rest of the story. Of the original 104 colonists who settled Jamestown in 1607, a mere dozen were hardy laborers. The rest of them were fancy folk, dudes, gentlemen so-called, who refused to roll up their silk sleeves. For them, the overwhelming majority, Jamestown was simply an adventure, certainly nothing to get all sweaty about. These dandies had never worked a day in the old world, and they would be equally reluctant to do so in the new one. This potentially disastrous situation worried Captain John Smith, so to his home office, the colonial leader dispatched an urgent request for workers. He wanted somebody willing to work. And so in 1608 arrived the good ship Mary and Margaret, bearing supplies, and even more important, workmen, craftsmen. And within 3 weeks, a plot had been cleared, a furnace had been built, pine trees were tapped, tar and pitch were distilled. It was the first American factory. Next, a soap works was set up, then a sawmill. So these workers who arrived on the Mary and Margaret would be remembered always as the men who rescued Jamestown. But this is the rest of the story. Years passed. The workers continued to work diligently, although it seems their diligence was increasingly taken for granted, even when 2 of them saved John Smith's life by thwarting an Indian ambush. The incident received little more than a mention in the governor's diary. Anyway, in the summer of 1619, a meeting was called at the Jamestown church. The new governor, Sir George Yeardley, presided. His intention was to organize the first representative legislative assembly in America. Permitting this degree of autonomy was a major concession for the London Company. It meant that for the first time the colonists would be allowed to vote for the men who would represent them in government. However, one group of colonists would be denied the right to vote: the workmen and the craftsmen who had rescued Jamestown in the first place. Well, the response of these workers to this indignity, understandably, was to call a strike. No vote, no work. And this was indeed significant, for the strike initiated by that group of early American laborers and artisans was the first ever strike in the New World. Rejecting the governor's excuse that they had somehow remained indebted for their transatlantic passage, the workers held out, and their idleness so threatened the colonial economy that before the end of July their voting rights were granted. The strike of 1619 had succeeded. And thus did the men who had taught the English how to work make the first triumphant stand for civil liberties on American soil. You see, the workmen and the craftsmen who had bailed out Jamestown colony were not English. Not English at all. More than 350 years before the Solidarity Union would be founded in their fatherland, they, Polish immigrants, went on strike for social justice in America, and they won. And now you know the rest of the story.